This next session brings together 3 guests that have come here from New South Wales to talk about how circular economy really needs to be driven from the grassroots.
So we're really excited to create a little discussion here to really focus on the social dimension of the circular economy, which has been underplayed quite a bit. There's a lot of discussion around policy and technologies. We've been looking at what do people actually do to implement these circular economy practices. Some of the research work that I've been doing in the UTS Business School has been looking at how do sustainability officers actually implement circular economy. And what we're finding is rather than creating that business case internally within their own organisation, the role that they play is beyond the organisation in brokering and leveraging networks with sometimes unfamiliar stakeholders. It might be with having to create new relationships with local government, with suppliers, or to join with people who were previously their competitors to put that sort of pressure on the supply chain. And this is creating a really different social dimension to the role of a sustainability officer as they become a broker of the relationships within their supply chain and their broader networks. We wanted to also understand that social dimension in relation not just to the business world, but the circular economy is something that is affecting communities and has the potential to be able to create new solutions for driving energy, for example, new food systems in local communities, and that's some of the other research work that's being conducted as well. So, Simon, I think you wanted to just give us a brief overview of what that looks like.
Yeah, look, I think certainly in my research, looking at some of these big socio-technical systemic changes, and so many of these transitions happen from at a high scale, high-level systems. Often we talk about the technologies, things that are perhaps easily adopted, but often we neglect the engagement. How do we drive this stuff from the grassroots up through community? And one of the projects I've been looking at is the Clean Cowra project that Dylan is really responsible for driving, along with his small team of volunteers. Been going for over 4 years, and there it's become evident that the people engagement, the winning hearts and minds, and building this from the grassroots up is a key element of gaining buy-in and longevity and sustainability of the project itself. So we thought it would be really interesting to have a conversation about, rather than these high-level, slightly imposed transitions or changes, some of the differences and challenges perhaps of building these systemic circular economies from the grassroots up, and that's something that Dylan's been involved in. So maybe, Dylan, you could talk a little bit about the process and perhaps some of the challenges of really trying to engage your local community in this circular economy transition.
As you said, I think it's been a series of conversations, and so over time it's been about introducing the concept and the principles around what we were trying to achieve. Also responding to a lot what people were saying, so on the ground, what were people saying, what was agitating, what were the issues for them. And in essence it was really about, for them it was primarily focused around production and energy and around waste components and what that meant to them. And we're talking primarily about industry and agriculture and government. So when we mean community, I guess it's an agricultural community, so it's really about that sector and that how they influence and are part of that local community, grassroots community. And so, as I said, it was a lot of conversations initially just about understanding and listening and explaining some of the potential of what we were trying to look at and explore. And so not adopting sort of a very strategic approach about it, but more just engaging them in the idea and bringing them along the journey with what you're trying to achieve. And I think some of the key components was getting the council, the local government, on board. I think atypically with regional small councils, I guess a lot of resistance to change and what that means, and quite often if there's not the understanding, there's the resistance. And so it was how to get them in a position of feeling comfortable that this was something that they could look at and explore and support. And one of the key leverage points was actually engaging with one of the local councillors who what we were presenting was effectively appealing to his constituency, his people, and its application to what we were trying to achieve. And so once we had that level of support, it was easy to go and get the broader support of the council. And as you know, council's unusual beast. You might get support within management, but unless you actually get the representative councillors on board, it's quite hard to implement change within government. But I think once we had that, there was also an understanding, well, we're a community organisation. What level of support do you have from the broader community? I mean, you're presenting these ideas and you're suggesting we should change and we should be doing all these things. And it was really about getting the support of industry and agriculture and behind the project. And I think once they could see that we had that and that support was evident when members of the community were calling council saying, why aren't you delivering on this project? Why aren't you supporting it further? They started to appreciate what level of support we'd garnished from the broader sector.
I mean, these are quite long-term transitions. So how do you sustain that interest over the life of the transition? These transitions to energy and waste are not happening overnight. They're longer term.
No, and I guess it was also we could hear what they were talking about, and so I guess we were quite responsive to that. But at the same time, I guess we're a volunteer organisation. We're not paid to do what we do technically, so it was about how do we keep this level of engagement. And I admit, because it has been such a long haul, you're conscious that you might be losing the momentum that you gained, that you got to a position and people were saying, well, why is it taking so long? Why haven't we got things happening? And I guess it was the nature of that cyclic process that you had to continue the engagement and you had to explain where it was going, but you also had to then develop the project of actually what it meant in a tangible sense. So understanding the more technological and other implementations, but the social component was actually as important. But in order to hang on to that, you still had to keep telling the story. And I guess that level of being right in the keep telling the story of where you were up to, what was happening, and was hard because some people disengage. We haven't got a project. It's 4 years down the track. We haven't got anything there, and that was probably a difficult component of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great story for us to be able to share, though, and I think it's really important for other communities who are wanting to create some sort of change, whether it be towards clean energy or around establishing local food systems, that there's a lot of people power that actually has to drive that transition, and that it requires that consistent, building relationships between members of a community, and also then leveraging with local government, which is a dimension, related to social capital, really, that we tend to underplay when we're thinking about circular economy.
And I guess that we've always underpinning around it being a community enterprise, not being a commercial or corporate concern trying to implement this at a level. We were saying, who are the people who want to participate in this, and how do we develop it to the next level? So a lot of it's really about engagement and collaboration around their issues and sharing those issues and trying to find a solution around that. So is it extendable? Can you apply it to other parties? I think it's about that process, not about what you're actually implementing. I think there'll be elements of what you can implement and achieve in other communities, but it's really about process.
And therein lies a bit of the challenge, right? Because the environmental measures are just that, they're measurable, they're specific. Whereas the process and the social is a little more intangible, and volatile, and so there's a real complexity there and a set of skills perhaps that are somewhat different to a standard implementation around sustainability.
Look, and I can probably, from a personal perspective, reference it off architectural practice and a process of self-critique, and I don't mean that in a personal sense, but you're always applying critique to what you're trying to achieve, and it becomes quite iterative. And so exploring this is the path we're going, and then you're testing it and you're validating the idea, and then you come back to the original idea and testing it again. And I think it's really about adopting that in a different context, not about a building or a specific precinct. It's about that process and that project. So it's the same mindset, but a different approach or strategy.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing those stories, and I think to continue this work would be a call for other people to continue understanding those social processes at a community level and to continue to share those stories so that we can understand what those contextual factors are that really enable circular economy practices to be implemented. So thanks.